The Tears of God. A novel by Dr. A. Ahmed. This book continues the story of the Arab sugar daddy and the beautiful Indian girl, and the story of the Indian child bride and the old Arab husband, and the story of the Indian Miss World and the rage of Muslims of the world, and also the story of Christina and the complete Jew. They have been written in English and translated into Arabic by the author Dr. Ahmed. This tale resonates with genuine love, strong resilience, and steadfast courage. I invite you to accompany me as I narrate the adventures of the extremely beautiful Indian girl, Aphrodite Khan, and her handsome American lover, Michael Lewinsky, in the Muslim world. Before we dive in the tapestry of the story, I would like to remind the reader this novel is narrated in 6 books. Book 1, The Arab Sugar Daddy and the Beautiful Indian Girl. Book 2, The Indian Child Bride and the Old Arab Husband. Book 3, The Indian Miss World and the Rage of Muslims of the World. Book 4, Christina and the Complete Jew. Book 5, The Tears of God, Jews, Blacks, and Muslim Women. And Book 6, The Hidden Life of the Prophet Muhammad. This is an intriguing epic story which exhibits resilience, love, and sacrifice. Book 5. Researching the social life of the Muslim woman in the Islamic world. Copyrights. All rights are reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of the author, except by a reviewer, who may quote brief passages from a review for printing in a public newspaper, general magazine, school journal, or university article. All characters in this novel are fictional, and any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, is merely coincidental. Chapter 44. The Flying Death. Michael and Christina continued to walk in the night for some time. Though they are walking under the open sky, still they feel as if they are going through a dark and long tunnel, with neither a beginning nor an end. Several times, due to her weakened state, Christina's feet numbed to the point they could not hold her anymore. Michael should piggyback her and walk on. With the weight of his wife on his back and greatly reduced vision, he stumbled twice, his foot went into a hole, and once he stepped on a small rock. In both times, he managed to recover his balance and avoid a fall. The couple's progress became difficult and is peppered with frequent stops to rest. Michael's strong faith in God became the anchor to take them through the dark and frightening night of Africa. He kept on singing encouraging hymns and psalms and claiming the promises of God in the Holy Bible. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me, your rod and your staff they comfort me. Psalm 23, verse 4. Thou shalt not be afraid for the terror by night, nor for the arrow that fleeth by day. Psalm 91, verse 5. The wilderness that the American couple is walking in is known as the poor savanna, where the trees are less in number and shorter in height, amidst the sand and empty land. Poisonous snakes and scorpions abounded. They simply placed their fate in God's hands and ventured into the unknown. A few miles are remaining to the border of South Sudan. They decided to walk throughout the night, rest, and a little sleep only during the day. By the time the rays of the early morning dawn began piercing the far horizon, Michael and Christina had become so exhausted that they were no longer able to continue their escape to freedom. They collapsed on a small hill of sand and slept the sleep of the dead. Neither the rays of the warm sun nor the flies and ants swarming over their bodies can seem to awaken them. They are sleeping like logs, without dreams and movements. If someone happened to pass by them, they could well be mistaken for corpses. Michael has been forced out of his sleep by the deafening sound of a helicopter hovering overhead. Christina did not wake up. She is still comatose. Michael has become overjoyed and excited at the thought that they have safely crossed the border and are being greeted by a helicopter belonging to the Southern Air Force of the SPLA. He woke up his wife and joyfully informed her that God had answered their prayers and sent help for them. Then he showed her the helicopter which was descending overhead. The American couple got to their feet, jumping up and down, waving their arms, and shouting their loud voices as if they could be heard over the noise. If that helicopter has been sent for them, then it has been sent by the devil. For the evil of all evils is inside it. It is the terrible man, Khalid Mansour Al-Had. At first, he could not recognize them. His pilot was the one who spotted the two sleeping little people. He told his leader, who instructed him to turn around and return to the place where he had spotted them. By then the American husband has already forced his Indian wife out of her deep slumber. When the helicopter turned back, Christina was doing a joyful jig and dancing with Michael. The devil incarnate Khalid has spotted her long hair which reached below her hips. He knows she is the accursed slut he is looking for, since no black Arab woman or African girl can have hair down to her feet. The longest female hair in his country cannot reach below the neck. By the time the young white man removed his black hat and began to use it to wave to their supposedly angelic helpers, Khalid had not had a single iota of doubt that he had found the two foreign fugitives. They are the accursed Indian slut and her uncircumcised infidel devil who is fucking her without a marriage, just like a dog and its bitch. For a few minutes, the evil man struggled with the urgent temptation of jumping down out of the cockpit and catching the blasphemous slut and killing her with his bare hands. Nothing can give him more pleasure than throttling her neck and strangling her to death. His enjoyment will know no bounds at the sight of her bulging eyes and extending tongue while she is turning red from her struggles. He would continue tightening his grip on her neck until she breathed her last in front of him. Then he must prostrate on the ground and offer the prayer of thanksgiving to his Allah, who has given him the honor of murdering the blasphemous woman who dared to insult his righteous prophet Muhammad. All those thoughts went like a video of a terrorist beheading his defenseless female victim in cold blood. But the evil Khalid is not that foolish to jump into his death and let the Indian slut escape again without she has been harmed. He consulted his pilot about the possibility of landing somewhere near those two evil foreigners. He understood that the two American jail escapees had somehow assumed that someone had come in his helicopter to pick them up and take them to safety. His pilot told him that there was no place that the helicopter could land without risking a plane crash. Then Khalid asked his pilot if there was a ladder that they could extend for them to climb up on, and the pilot answered in the negative. The leader of the Muslim terrorists, Khalid Mansour Al-Had, has radioed the other planes and advised that they have found the object of their search. Then he ordered them to come to the place where his helicopter was hovering over the American couple like a vulture that had spotted two dead carcasses. He does not want anyone to snatch the gold medal from his hands by killing the blasphemous woman before him. Finally, the evil man decided to execute an airstrike on the two enemies of Allah by shooting them from the sky. He grabbed a long-range rifle and ordered his pilot to keep circling them so he could shoot and kill them both. By then the American couple began to feel a bit worried by the prolonged delay of their rescue. First, they expected either someone to throw down a ladder or the helicopter to land close by. Instead, they are greeted with a hail of bullets kicking up the sand around them. The first wave of bullets fell around them and set them on their heels. The American husband reacted fast and caught hold of his Indian wife's hand and began to run her out of that accessible area. Tumbling down the sandy hill, they plunged into the bush. The trees are not tall enough to hide them from their shooter. The helicopter dogged their heels, and a shower of bullets followed them in. Michael told Christina to bend down while she was running with him. His idea worked well since the bush now obscured the shooter's line of sight. Sadly, they are still being tracked. Khalid Mansour Al-Had is not only a born killer, but he is an evil genius. He is hoping for a lucky shot, knowing that a moving target from a helicopter is a difficult if not impossible situation. Changing tactics, he decided to change his assassination method and settled upon another method with a higher degree of kill probability. He has decided to burn them alive and enjoy the show from the safety of his high perch. He knows he can do that by bombing them. He has deduced that just 2 or 3 incendiaries will be able to set the entire area on fire. Likewise, a few rockets can blow those 2 infidel foreigners into bits and pieces. Once again, the frightened American couple is surprised by the first bomb falling and exploding just a few meters from their hiding spot. By then they have run out of breath and have no further reserves of energy to call upon. They found a few trees and hid under the canopies. From where they are hiding, they cannot see the helicopter, but the chop of the sound of its blades announces its proximity. Before they can do anything, another bomb has fallen close by. Michael and Christina felt their end had come, unavoidable and final. They concluded that at any moment their bodies are going to be blown into smithereens. The American husband has asked his Indian wife again to forgive him for bringing her to this dark part of the world and causing her untimely death through such a horrible end. For the first time, since they met, Christina has shown more faith in God than Michael. She reminded her husband of his last night's prayer and the promising verses that he read for her. After reciting some promising verses back to her frightened American husband, the loving Indian wife told him that no matter what danger is surrounding us now, we must be unbending in our trust in God. Our mighty God, she added quickly, shut the mouths of the lions, and quench the fire of a burning furnace to save those who trust in him. The same God is alive, and he is still their salvation. Michael, faith revived, began praying with a call to God for their deliverance. The evil genius scheme has worked as expected. The 3 bombs have been dropped in a triangular pattern. The tinder dry scrub and grass began to ignite, and the flames set the trees on fire. In an abbreviated time, the evil man can see from his safe position in the chopper the 2 foreigners are surrounded by the rising flames. He began to laugh and praise his Allah while looking down from his lofty perch. He has concluded that they have no way of escape. They cannot possibly outrun the flames and the choking smoke. A wall of flames has surrounded them. He has a clear window of opportunity for a shot, but he restrained himself, preferring to have them burn alive. He laughed sarcastically and said to his Muslim pilot, as unclean infidels and enemies of Allah and his infallible prophet Muhammad, let them taste some of the fires of hell before they enjoy the real hellfires forever. Just as the son of the devil has uttered his last sarcastic words, the helicopter lurched as if hit by a bolt of lightning from the heavens. Fire, fed by aviation fuel, engulfed it. The American couple Michael and Christina have a better view of it from ground zero. They looked up just in time to see a rocket homing in on its fuselage, turning it into a lofty ball of fire. It is a flying balloon of bright flame, continuing to fly until it has crashed somewhere in the bush, the rising smoke and flames marking its final place of rest. The 2 American escapees have seen it all, but they have become at a loss as to what has happened, caught by surprise like the crew of the helicopter. Only the man who fired the rocket knew the full story. A soldier of the SPLA, he spotted the helicopter and positively identified its call sign and insignia as that of the accursed black Arabs. He, however, is not authorized to use deadly force without a direct order from a higher authority. Calling in his subordinates, the military headquarters at Juba City convened an emergency meeting to decide on the disposition of trespassing intruders. The attending Southern generals collectively agreed to bring the aircraft down with deadly force. Thus ordered, the soldier happily complied. He fired an earth-to-sky missile at the trespassing helicopter and brought it down. This time, the devil incarnate Khalid Mansour al-Had could not cheat his fate. He has been roasted alive and his evil soul departed from its overcooked flesh to descend to Hades and the bottomless pit. He has been kept in that place of torment until the day he will stand before the white throne of Christ and be judged, condemned, and cast into the lake of fire, where he must spend his eternity with the devil, the Antichrist, and his false prophet Muhammad and their followers from the evil spirits and the lost human beings. Nevertheless, his evil scheme continued to work after his demise and haunt the living. The crashed helicopter has just refueled and carried a full complement of aviation fuel and munitions. Combined, they made for an explosion like a cataclysmic nuclear explosion of a nova, creating a huge balloon of flames spreading out a circle of flames in the bush and forming in the sky a stellar explosion of a supernova. It is like someone doused the area with kerosene, then showered it with gasoline, and set it afire. In his death, he became like one of those 19 evil terrorists who hijacked planes to carry out cowardly attacks against the Twin Towers in New York City and other places, and caused the death of 3,000 innocent Americans. Whether one can consider it a mere coincidence or count it as divine retribution that the man who brutally killed 2 innocent nuns has been burnt alive until his body is fully cooked, and then overcooked to finally assume the shape of an unidentifiable black ghost. Even his helicopter driver who perished with him happened to be the black Arab man who raped the 12-year-old daughter of the good old African man. The other Muslim terrorists in the squadron have reached in time to catch a glimpse of the incoming rocket homing in on their lead aircraft. They witnessed the deadly rocket as it hit the helicopter of their Lucifer, engulfing it in the fire. They have correctly guessed who has shot it down. They also knew their leader Khalid Satan al-Had had perished in the horrific crash. Instead of lamenting his horrific death, all of them are overjoyed. They are glad that their Allah, at last, rid them of that tyrant whose presence used to cause them to urinate in their underwear. Fearing to meet the same end as their evil leader, all helicopters of the black Arabs have turned around and flown back to friendlier skies lest they too meet the same cruel fate of their terrorist leader. In the meantime, the American couple Christina and Michael have found themselves surrounded by flames in all directions. With all escape routes cut off, they gave up hope and surrendered to their unavoidable death by burning alive. They even stopped praying and trusting in God for rescue anymore. Before the onset of the flames reached them, thick billowing smoke started to engulf their bodies. Coughs and tears accompanied the acrid, superheated air, visibility dropping to less than a couple of meters. The place has become as hot as hell. They embraced each other and waited. They stopped talking to each other. They felt that the only thing they could do now was to die in each other's arms. Even that kind of honorable death has been denied to them. Christina fainted and her body began to crumble. Michael has weakened to the point that he cannot hold her up. He has only managed to lay her body down. He felt as if he was putting his beloved wife's body to its final rest on the ground. If he could dig a grave and bury her unconscious body in it before those huge tongues of flames could consume it, he would have done so. Instead of digging a grave, he has prostrated over the body of his beloved wife and covered it by his body. He thinks the fire might only consume his body and spare his beloved wife's unconscious body. The smoke became too much for him to inhale anymore. Asphyxia tightened its grip on him, bringing the onset of unconsciousness, and is about to send him into a comatose state too. He embraced his wife and tightened his grip on her. Alone with thoughts of his situation, the loving American husband broke out in sobs, saddened by the fate destined for his beloved Indian wife. He wished that it were him all alone in this scary place, doomed to die a lonely death, without anyone knowing or shedding tears for him. It is said that only when the man loses all hope in life that the divine rescue will come. That is exactly what happened in those critical moments. After Michael gave up all hope, then God dropped a tiny idea in his mind. It has just flashed like lightning and lit everything with stunning clarity. At that very last moment, he suddenly remembered a movie he watched when he was 7 or 8 years old. What happened at the end of that movie was exactly what his beloved wife and he are going through in their desperate situation. Both the heroine and her hero were surrounded by huge flames of fire. The heroine fainted and collapsed on the ground. The hero fell on her body and covered it with his body. But he did not just wait for the flames to come and consume his body and the body of his beloved heroine. He did something and saved her life and his life. When he saw that movie as a child he believed it. But as a grown-up, he can now view the same scene with some serious doubts. But as they also say, a drowning man will clutch at a straw. Michael jumped on his feet and ran towards the flames. He took hold of a stick, which he tore off from a small dry emaciated tree. He used the big dagger that was still fastened between his left shoulder and underarm. It is the weapon that he stole from the dying African detainee when they got imprisoned together in the dark hut in En Nahid town. Then Michael quickly lit the tree's stick as a torch with the encroaching flames and ran back to where Christina lay on the ground. He began to burn the grass around her. He burned some area around her body and then put the fire off. He continued to do that until he made a small perimeter of black ash around them. Hurriedly he has undressed up his wife and left her only in her underwear and bra. He swiftly did the same thing to his outer garment and remained in his underwear. That done, he once again fell on top of his beloved wife's unconscious and naked body and covered it with his bare body. In less than a couple of minutes of accomplishing this challenging task, the flames have reached them. Feeling the fire, he bent over the half-naked body of his beloved wife and covered her as if a fiery dragon had come to consume her. The heat of the fire is unbearable. He felt as if his flesh was burning and his underwear was charring. He has concluded ironically that the scene in his childhood movie was simply movie magic, an idea unworkable in real life. The huge smoke overcomes him, and he faints too. Chapter 45. The second night in the jungle of Africa. It is Christina who first regained her consciousness. She struggled for some time trying to get her unconscious lover off her. She managed somehow to slide out from beneath him and extricated herself. She tried standing, but she fell flat on her face. She lacks control over her body, her limbs dormant and slow to respond. She stopped her ineffective movements and looked around. Her wandering eyes scanned the periphery and came to a dead stop when Michael came into her narrowed field of vision. Dazed, she has totally forgotten her American husband. It is like she is sleepwalking. She cannot fully grasp what she is seeing and experiencing. She is experiencing amnesia. She knew she had seen that person before, but she could not remember his name. Worse, she realized that she did not know who she was. Reduced to depending on instinct, she reacted like a newborn animal, fully cognizant, but without the benefit of experience and knowledge. The entire traumatic experience has just robbed her of her identity. Curiosity led her to crawl to Michael's body and touch it. She jerked her hand back because he was hot to the touch, deciding not to touch him again. She is suddenly aware of an overwhelming desire to drink water. Her tongue was dry, and it rasped against the roof of her mouth. She found it impossible to walk, much less talk. As her strength returned, she started looking for water. It is then that bits and pieces of her memory come back to her. She vaguely remembered the events leading up to her current situation. She remembered the shooting, bombs, and ferocious flames licking the poor savannah. She then remembered her American husband. At that moment, she realized the comatose body or lifeless person before her eyes was none other than her lover, Michael Lewinsky. Emotions rushed and filled her entire being. She cannot move or cry. She is smelling death filling the air that she is breathing. The smell of the completely scorched and blackened land around her confirmed her fears. For the first time, Christina felt that she had lost Michael forever. The impending dread that her husband is dead galvanized her into movement. She forced herself to crawl over to him, and instead of tentatively touching him, she fell on him. She dug deep into her reserves and turned him over, nesting him in her arms. When she is seeing no response, she shook him violently as if in anger. A feeling of helplessness overwhelmed her which only subsided when he revived, opening his eyes painfully and staring blankly at her. All opposing emotions crowded her chest, suffocating her, effectively choking her throat. All at once, she wants to cry, laugh, shout, bewail, rejoice, mourn her loss, dance for joy, crawl, and die, and yet live again. Michael was able to regain his senses more quickly than she did. He remembered everything. He now knew, beyond a shadow of a doubt, what David meant when he said, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me, your rod and your sword, they comfort me." What they have gone through is nothing less than what David had been forced to endure, which led him to write that wonderful, inspiring psalm. Michael's faith in God solidified like iron. It became a matter of fact to him that there is God in the heavens watching over his children, and he is sovereign over everything, and nothing can happen without his knowledge and predestined will. It was his loving Indian wife who strengthened him, and reminded him that God would neither leave them nor deny them. Though death was flying over their heads, and the flames of the enemies had surrounded them from all directions, Christina still stood in her faith in God, and encouraged her American husband never to give up on his faith in their mighty God. "Our mighty God," said Christina, "shut the mouths of the lions and quench the fire of a burning furnace to save those who trust in him. The same God is alive, and he is still our salvation." Therefore, her American husband's faith in his Lord was revived, and hence he began praying with a call to God for their deliverance. The two American lovers, Michael and Christina, can now say proudly, and with full confidence in tandem with Isaiah, "When the enemy shall come in like a flood, the Spirit of the Lord shall lift a standard against him," quoting from Isaiah 59, verse 19. After that, the American husband began to worry about his beloved Indian wife, when he saw her darkened face, bearing the mark of smoke and flames. He also noticed how her mouth and tongue were parched like old paper. "Her tears are falling like a flood out of her blackened eyes." She tried to talk to him, but her voice failed her. She just kept weeping and smiling at the same time, and looking at him without blinking, as if he may disappear in the space of a blink. Michael told her to sit where she was and wait for him. He promised to return shortly. He remembered where they slept before the helicopter attacked them. He reasoned that the person who came into that cockpit of death was none other than the so-called righteous police officer of Allah, Babakar Hussein Osama. He then remembered the rocket that brought down the aircraft, and the fiery explosion. He thanked his good Lord who saved their lives and ridden them of that dreadful Muslim terrorist. Michael backtracked to the small hill of sand and fetched their belongings, returning at once to his beloved wife. He neither drank nor ate from his rations until Christina had satisfied her thirst and assuaged her hunger. They both drank and ate from the same heavenly manna that their female godmother, the white nun Catherine de Niro, had given them at her Christian charity home. After their souls revived and their bodies refreshed, Michael narrated to Christina what had happened after she fell unconscious in his arms. He told her that it was the hand of God that saved them from imminent death. He explained to her how he burned the grass around her body to starve the advancing flames of fuel. He knew and understood that the fire could not burn once again the place it had already burnt. He then explained to his beloved wife the movie he had watched when he was just a child of 7. He had learned that idea from his childhood movie. He then surmised that the billowing smoke had rendered him unconscious as the fire burnt around them, but could not reach their unconscious bodies. Nevertheless, he refused to credit for his knowledge or ability, but gave all the glory and praise to God who illuminated that dim childhood memory and used it to save their lives. Christina fully agreed with him, and likewise gave thanks to the Lord who alone miraculously preserved their lives. Yes, it is God alone who intervened by saving them from the evilest and most dangerous terrorist men ever walked on the planet Earth after the Prophet Muhammad. The American couple's next concern is to continue their hazardous journey. They decided to move quickly as far as they could from that valley of the shadow of death. The fire had burnt a huge area, and turned everything black. He then Even the trees became like ominous shadows of ghosts. Everything around them reeked of death and destruction. Once again, they found themselves facing the unknown. Once again, they resumed their hazardous and uncertain trip toward the South Sudan border. Without a map, compass, or GPS, they placed their hopes in their unwavering faith in the God of heaven, Jehovah, who took the children of Israel upon the wings of eagles and brought them through that terrible wilderness of Sinai to their promised land, the land that flows with milk and honey. The two intimate lovers began to sing one of their favorite songs, "For the captain of the host is Jesus, and we are following in his footsteps, and no foe can stand against us in the land." Then they prayed and encouraged each other with many promising verses, which they had memorized by heart. After that, they resumed their hazardous trip. They had no inkling that they had already crossed the border, and were already standing on the south of Sudan soil during the deadly air raid of the doomed helicopter of the accursed black Arabs. Soon enough, Michael and Christina have again forgotten what God had done for them. After all the promising verses and prayers and inspired songs, the American couple's faith quickly began to waver when they entered the rich savanna where the trees were no longer shorter than them. Nightfall buried them in darkness. The trees gradually started becoming taller and growing denser and denser. It appeared that the further they went, the more the terrain looked like a scary jungle. The couple had been told at the Christian charity home that the jungle of the south of Sudan has lions, leopards, elephants, unicorns, wild buffaloes, antelopes, and hyenas. Among all those wild beasts, the hyenas are the most dangerous. Africans believe that the lion attacks you only when it is hungry, but the hyena is like a human being in that it attacks regardless of whether it is hungry or not. After killing you, it will bury your body in a shallow pit until it decomposes, and then it will come back and devour it when it is hungry. Another devious habit of the hyena, like a terrorist, it will not attack you face to face. It attacks at a time that you will not be expecting it, preferring the element of surprise from the rear. It follows you the whole night until you fall asleep, and then it attacks you when you are unarmed and unprepared for the fight with it. I guess the Muslim terrorists had learned their cowardly tactics of attacking the non-combatants from the example of the African hyenas. They have no military uniforms to distinguish them from other citizens. Therefore, they move freely in society and blow their bodies up in crowded places without anyone knowing them or suspecting their cowardly terrorist attacks. That is why the war on terror is taking a long time, because Muslim terrorists are difficult to identify and fight. There is also a great possibility that the tsetse fly may bite Michael and Christina. No one can know that a tsetse fly has bitten him until he falls asleep forever. Tsetse fly puts its victim to sleep and kills him while he is sleeping. It seems it is the first creature to come up with the idea of euthanasia, or painless mercy killing. Even nature seems not to favor or have mercy on the two fugitive foreigners in the jungle. They have not covered more than a couple of kilometers before the rain comes down in sheets. Wordlessly, they know any further progress will be impossible in the stormy rain of Africa. They are expected to be attacked and killed by wild beasts or human beasts, but not by natural disasters such as heavy rain, thunderbolts, wind, and flood. They are making their way along an unpaved, roughly hewn road. Due to the long-lasting civil war between the northern Muslim Mujahideen fighters and the southern Christian rebels, all roads and highways were neglected for many years, and nature had reclaimed her own. Due to the heavy pouring of the rain, the couple has no choice except to discontinue their journey and seek safe shelter for the night. They cannot just sit in the middle of the road and let the rain drench them. Soon the road is going to be a mire of mud or the conduit for a flash flood. As the water inundates the land, it will soon drive the snakes out of their holes and displace them everywhere in the water. In that regard, the safest place, relatively speaking, is to do as the monkeys do and spend the night clinging to the treetops on the most comfortable bough one can reach. If the two lovers can manage to remain awake throughout the night in that miserable position without falling asleep and falling headlong and breaking their necks, and if they have avoided lightning strikes, then Michael and Christina can dodge the sword of Damocles and survive the most dangerous place in the jungle of south of Sudan. The American couple, therefore, climbed up the tallest tree they found and made their bedding on top of its branches. Michael as usual made a heroic sacrifice, and convinced his beloved wife to spend the night sleeping like a baby girl on his lap, while he remained awake throughout the night as her guardian angel. He covered her and his body with a small blanket that had been given to them by the southern Sudanese nun Patricia Akal at the Christian Charity Home. The blanket is thick and hence became like a small tent, but did little to keep the continuous pouring of water from drenching them, chilling them to the bone. Even though something is better than nothing, the blanket became to them as valuable as spending their second night in a 5-star hotel in the scary jungle of Africa. Chapter 46. Falling captives to the naked savages in the African jungle. The following morning, the American couple reevaluated their progress and decided to walk during the day and rest at night. After having something to eat from their dwindling supplies, they descended from their tree of life and haven and began to slog along the now muddy road. Progress is slow, with hidden potholes covered with last night's surface runoff of rain. Michael did not manage to sleep at all the previous night, but they decided to keep on and continue their hazardous journey. He told his wife that they must simply walk until they can no longer walk further. Forsaking sleep and rest, his first priority is to minimize their time in this inhospitable, scary place. The American couple walked and walked until they could walk no longer. Their feet are numbed, swollen, and stiffened. Their bodies are wet with perspiration and sore with aches. All their clothes are soiled, muddy, and torn. Looking at each other, they had not expected to see themselves in such a sorry state. Necessity drove them to fall on the muddy ground and sleep. It was noontime when the couple had been forced to discontinue their walk. Although everything is watery and muddy, the tropical heat is unbearably compounded by the humidity. They lay in the mud, sweating from the sweltering heat. The American couple's deep sleep was interrupted 3 hours later. It was around 3:30 p.m. when Michael woke up with a shout of terror, when his body received a kick from a strong foot. Christina also has received one powerful kick on her butt. She not only shouted in panic, but kept on screaming, as if she had seen the devil with his 2 horns, and his black demon standing in the flesh in front of her naked eyes. In her terror, she began to scream unintelligibly and speak gibberish. Her fear increased as her eyes focused and took in the scene around them. Her screaming reached a zenith until she could scream no more. Instead of one scary creature, she discovered they are so many of them. At first, she thought they were black ghosts. Then her mind told her that they were ferocious jungle beasts. Her phobic response quietened when one of those scary creatures opened his mouth and made some kind of a gesture. She jumped to the hasty conclusion that it was a half-human and a half-animal. He appeared to her disturbed mind as a monstrous humanoid. All those jungle creatures are as black as the dark of the night, but when they open their mouths, they have teeth as white as snow. Michael is the first one to identify them as some species of human beings, but his mind rejects the possibility of being ordinary human beings. Whatever his mind has told him, he still refuses to give them the status of human beings. First off, human beings cannot be that black and monstrous in their outside appearances. Second, no matter how savage, human beings crave adornment and do not go around fully naked. They are standing in front of them, as naked as babies. Their genitals revealed that they are males. Michael's mind struggled for a while before at last, it admitted these scary creatures are, indeed, human beings. This conclusion was forced on his head when he heard those monstrous humans begin to talk to each other in a kind of human dialect. It is not a kind of dialect that angry or humans happy may use to communicate with each other. It sounded like some cannibal savages found some fresh human meat and fighting about who could devour it. Then the American husband shouted at his extremely frightened Indian wife, and told her that by her continuous screaming those human beings may get irritated and kill her. Christina shouted back as loud as she could and told him those were not human beings but some black-skinned elves of the jungle of Africa, who had gathered around to partake of their next meal on their bodies. Before Michael can respond to his wife, he sees yet another species join the so-called black-skinned elves. The new arrivals refuted his wife's conclusion and assured him that they were some kind of aboriginal African tribe. He felt like Marco Polo, who discovered a new species of humanity yet unknown to man. They are all completely naked save small pieces of skin covering their female genitals. Their fully exposed big breasts indicated that they were the female counterparts of the black males. Their arrival brought a glimmer of hope for Christina and made her stop shouting, but she continued to squeal and tremble, and her teeth kept on hitting each other. Michael understood no one of those savages could speak English and still spoke some words to them with some help of body language. The way they responded made him regret that he opened his mouth. One of them hit him with a big stick on his back. The other two lifted him by the hands until his feet hung in the air. Those Africans are so tall, but they are very skinny, as if they do not eat enough food. One of them grabbed Christina by her long hair and forced her on her feet. He did not let go of her hair until she screamed and bit his hand. A black female responded by delivering a slap on Christina's face. The American husband shouted at his Indian wife and told her to try not to respond physically to their rough behavior. He warned her she must not treat them as normal humans because they are savages. The American couple's hands have been tied with ropes, and they are forced to march with their black captors. They concluded that they were taking them to caves to eventually become their cannibal meal. They followed in silence, but their hearts were beating as loud as the African drums. All the dangers they had faced in the north of Sudan had not filled their hearts with so much fear as the current predicament. After a long walk through the dense jungle, the dark-skinned people finally brought them to their temporary camp. It contained so many small huts that hardly any one of them could be enough for two people to sleep in it. The couple perceived that those jungle people had not yet socially developed to have the concept of family. They are still like a herd of animals that live together but sleep separately. Their conclusion is soon confirmed when they witnessed some of them having sexual intercourse openly, and no one seemed to bother about such improper behavior. Michael began to worry that one of the males may recognize his wife as a female and jump on her and rape her in front of him, and he can do nothing to save her since he is tied up with hands and legs. Nothing of the sort happened. Instead, Christina's hands are freed from the ropes by two females. Then she has been given some milk to drink and some roots to eat. Michael cared that, if his wife refused to eat their food, they may feel offended and kill her. He told her to bless what they had offered to her and consume it. She trusted her husband, drank the milk, and ate what was placed before her. The same generosity is not offered to Michael. He is left lying on his back while his hands and legs are securely tied together by strong ropes. Christina's hands are tied up again, but her feet are left free. After that, some males came and carried Michael, took him to another part of the camp, and left him there. Michael resisted but could not stop the African men from transferring him and separating him from his wife. Christina cried and called out for Michael, telling him not to leave her alone with those monstrous people. But her husband can do nothing to help her. Michael has been puzzled for some time about the strange behavior of those African savages. He cannot understand why they showed some kindness towards his wife by feeding her but refused to be hospitable to him. Could it be because she is a female that why they cared about her and ignored him because he is a man? His mind immediately rejected such a possibility when he remembered they had replaced her ropes as soon as they had fed her. After that, they refused to feed him and separated him from his wife. His intellect began to direct his thoughts in a different direction. He reasoned out that those jungle people may be preparing his wife for an evil ritual. They want to prepare her for a kind of human sacrifice, or want to take her to their chief for his sexual pleasure. Whatever their intention, he knows that he must not leave Christina alone with those African savages. However, he found himself in a helpless situation, worse off than when he was imprisoned in that locked-up hut in En Nahid town. At least at that time, he was not bound by hands and feet. Here he has been kept alone in one part of the camp, and he cannot use his hands or legs. The only thing he can do in such a desperate situation is to pray to God and wait for him to do their rescue again. Michael's worries are true. Those jungle people are neither Christians nor Muslims, nor even followers of any other world religion. They are African animists. They worship the spirits of their ancestors whom they believe remained with them after their death. They also are deifying the chieftain of their tribe. He is living in a high mountain not far from where they are living. He is dwelling with 1,000 females as his sex slaves. Every female he desires must be available to him for his sexual pleasure. Many small underage girls must be first raped by the chief before they will be allowed to marry other males. If he does not like to have sex with a female because she is skinny, ugly, handicapped, deformed, or sick, he will spare her, and any other man can rob her virginity. His subjects intend to slay Michael as human sacrifice under the tree of the spirits of their dead ancestors, and then eat his flesh. After that, they are planning to take Christina to their great chief to add her to his wifely collection. Some of those African savages had in the past succeeded in going as far as the villages and towns of the tribes in the North Sudanese border, where they skirmished with the local black Arabs and abducted one particular girl for their tribe leader, which resulted in the kidnappers gaining high favor with their chieftain. Then the chief raped and impregnated that girl many times until finally, she died while giving birth to his child number 15. When she died, he offered her body to the tree of the spirits of his ancestors and then ate her flesh. After that, he sent many of his men back to raid the black Arab tribes, but they always got themselves killed, and so he had yet to own another Arab girl. The Antichrist captors considered themselves incredibly lucky to find such a white-skinned woman like the Indian girl Christina, with such ease, and without any need to fight or risk their lives. The previous girl was a black Arab woman who relatively had lighter skin color compared to the female's pitch-black skin color. Her hair was as long as that of a goat's tail and reached up to her shoulders. There is no difference between the hair of the male and the hair of the female among those jungle tribes. The only outside physical appearances to distinguish them are the breasts of the females and the exposed genitals of the males. This new Arab girl has hair longer than that of a horse that reaches below her big buttocks and stops at her legs. Therefore, on the same day, they found the Indian girl Christina, who they mistook for an Arab girl. They sent word to their chief that a very white Arab woman with long hair was on her way to him on the following morning. Besides the worry about the fate of his beloved wife Christina, Michael has been tortured by the millions of mosquitoes that are hovering over his head and feasting on his exposed flesh. Those mosquitoes and other night bloodsuckers can cause a corpse to wake and walk and the biggest elephant to drop down dead. Michael knew that, if he remained until the morning in that miserable situation, there would not be a single drop of blood remaining in his body. For the first time in his life, he wished that he is dead and gone instead of being alive and experiencing such unbearable torture. He cannot use his hands to ward off the parasitic pests, so he just keeps on rolling around and around like an epileptic person. For 8 months, while they were living in Sakina's house, Michael and Christina enjoyed the luxury of a mosquito net during the night and escaped that kind of torture. In addition, they used to burn local herbs and wood to ward mosquitoes off. When away from their hut, they would liberally spray repellent from head to toe to avoid being bitten by mosquitoes and other equally virulent bugs. Before fleeing from the charity home, their 2 thoughtful female hosts had given them some repellent, which they had used up until the time they were captured by the jungle savages. All those precautions were necessary, emphasized Dr. Kukutia, adding that African mosquitoes, among others, can infect their victims with the West Nile virus, dengue fever, and malaria. Michael has been treated as a totem animal and kept outside the camp, so that they can offer him in the morning as a human sacrifice under the sacred tree of their dead ancestors, following which they can drink his blood and devour his flesh. On the contrary, Christina is treated as the bride of the Nile, housed in a small hut, and cloaked in animal fur. She is fed well, her body is fully covered, and she is securely kept in a safe place. Those jungle savages know full well what will happen if the Arabian bride of the Nile gets bitten by the night insects, only to fall ill or die before being taken to the sexual monster, their chieftain. Meanwhile, her American husband Michael concluded that their many sins have brought all those punishments upon them. They had overtly denied Christ, instead claimed belief in Muhammad, replaced the Bible with the Quran, and changed their names twice to Muslim names. He remembered the case of King David and his sins of committing adultery with the beautiful woman Bathsheba, illegally impregnating her, murdering her husband Uriah the Hittite, taking her to be his wife, sinning against his nation, and of course, sinning against God. Although King David repented and God forgave him, still he bore the consequences of his sins. His own son Absalom revolted against him, he ran away before his enemies, and his son took his concubines and openly slept with them in his father's palace. It is crystal clear to Michael that what his wife and he are going through is the aftermath of their sins. He knew that they had repented their sins, and he believed that God had forgiven them, but they were experiencing the outcome of their sins. He does not know if their sins can finally result in their untimely death. No matter what the result of their sins may be, Michael decided never again to deny Christ or pretend to be a follower of any man-made religion, following only the divine faith of his Savior, the Lord Jesus Christ.